This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com. It's always important to reflect in a Torah way on current events. The recent horrors in Paris, where 129 people were gunned down and over 300 were injured, and it has the whole world talking about it and uniting over it. The reaction of many people is, it's interesting that over 129 people, the world erupts, while when 12,000 people were being gassed in Auschwitz every day, the world didn't blink an eye. So it sounds to be, it's a big question. How could it be that over 129 people, the world, France is asking the world to unite in a single coalition, demanding from Russia and America that they should unite B'Kel Echad, and here went and that's just in Auschwitz alone. When it was at the height of its killing, 12,000 people were being gassed every day, and people went about their life like nothing was happening. So we know that we ourselves answer this question with just saying, well, we know halacha b'yedua she'esav saynes Yaakov. It's a known thing that Esav hates Yaakov, that we're a seben shivim ze'evim, we're a sheep among 70 wolves, and it's business as usual. That's the flip answer that we say, that it's just another example of global anti-Semitism at its worst. But I venture to say that it's a little bit more than that. Of course, what I just said is true, and it's a reality, but it's a little bit more than that. You see, when the world sees 12,000 Jews being gassed, so the guy on the street, the Catholic, the Caucasian, says, well, I'm not a Jew. That has nothing to do directly with me. But when people go to a concert and 89 people are killed while recreating in a concert, and dozens of people are killed while eating in restaurants, and people are killed when there's a soccer game in a stadium between France and Germany, so then that people get very, very emotional about, because they also go to restaurants, and that could happen to them as well. And if we're not so flippant about this reaction, we would see that we're guilty of this kind of thought too. When myriads of people die in apartheid, so we don't get all gekocht over it. I mean, it's not a nice thing, and we feel bad about it, but it doesn't directly have to do with us. And in a more contemporary sense, there are many Americans that when they hear about the stabbings in Eretz Yisrael, it's a shame, it's terrible, but they don't get all chilled about it. I live in America, we don't have that problem. We don't have Arabs walking around we have to realize that when we see this reaction, it has to teach us to sharpen our noisei ba'olim chaveira, to sharpen our sense of empathy, and not to say, well, this doesn't directly relate to me. It's not something that could happen to me. My Talmud David Helfgott reminded me that I always talk about having in mind in Hashkivenu, especially on Shabbos, when we say Ufreis Aleinu Sukkah Shlemecha, Baruch Atah Hashem HaPoros Sukkah Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Hamo Yisrael V'al Yerushalayim. How much we have to have kavanah in that nowadays. But he reminded me that in Hashkivenu we actually make a plea to be protected from stabbings. What do we say in Hashkivenu? We say over there, from Oyev, Dever, V'cherev, that Hashem should protect us from the enemy, from plague, and from the sword. Right? So we ask clearly that Hashem should protect us, V'hasim imenu, and remove from us Oyev, an enemy, that's in this case the Arabs, Dever v'cherev. Now, it even bothered me that it's a little bit funny putting in between the words Oyev and Cherev Dever. Dever is pestilence. Now, unless we're talking about chemical warfare, and that they're sending scuds, Rahman al-Islam, with the bubonic plague, with all kinds of chemical warfare, what does it mean? V'hasim mimenu oyev dever v'cherev. The dever doesn't really fit over there, because dever is something that's not man-made. Oyev and cherev is man-made. So why do we put dever in between oyev and cherev? So I'd like to venture and suggest a possibility that the word dever homiletically means speaking. And here we have that an Arab comes up and speaks to somebody, and all of a sudden pulls out a knife and stabs him. That's what's happening. So that's Oyev, Dever, V'cherev. Oyev, the enemy, Dever, who speaks, and all of a sudden there's a cherev, and all of a sudden there's a stabbing. And we ask Hashem to remove that. And by the way, incidentally, another issue of Noisei Ba'olim Chaveirai is all the girls, and boys too, but prominently girls, that go to sleep crying in their pillows because nobody is reading them shidduchin. So in this tefillah we also say that Hashem should remove yogain v'anocha, the grief. And there's a lot of people that have grief over shidduchim, not only the girls, but the parents of the girls. You see the parents of the girls walking around with such a bitterness, with such a load on their back. They have 3 girls at home, 28, 29, 32, they're not getting shidduchin. What's going to be? It's a tremendous, tremendous yogain. We ask Hashem to remove that yogain. So, since I'm speaking a little bit about this subject, I want to reflect on what it says at the end of the parsha. At the end of the parsha, it says, "Vayashkein Lavan baboker." Lavan got up in the morning, v'yanashek, and he kissed his daughters. Vayavarech esem, he blessed them, and then at the end of the parsha, it says, "Vayelech vayoshev Lavan lemekayim," and Lavan returned home, which seems to be superfluous. What do we care where Lavan went? I mean, that's Vayelech, he left, goodbye, good riddance. The Torah has to tell us that he didn't stop by the grocery, he didn't go to a ball game, he went home. What is that all about? So in the Medrash Yelamdeinu, it says the Torah adds this to say that Lavan went home, and he found that while he was out chasing Yaakov, his house was ransacked. Bandits came, they turned his house upside down, and not only that, when they didn't find Lavan's wealth, they broke down the walls of the house to discover the jewels that he kept hidden in the walls of his house. You know, it says, Kalapaisel b'mumay paisel. He thought that Yaakov was hiding stuff in his mouth and in his chest. He hid stuff in the walls. So they not only did they ransack the house, but they tore down the house because they were looking for the jewels. And it says the Hamikdover in the Netziv, what's pshat? Vayelech, vayoshev Lavan lemekaymai. He returned back to his place. It says before Yaakov came, Lavan was a pauper. Then he became wealthy when Yaakov came, and now that Yaakov left, everything was stripped from him. He lost everything. And it's interesting, it says that Yaakov went, and he of course got bigger and bigger. He went from chayil to chayil, from one strength to another, while Lavan went midechi el dechi, from one loss to another loss. So says the Netziv that chayil is bigematria 48, and dechi, downturn, is bigematria 22. The difference between 48 and 22 is 26 Yud Kei Vav Kei. It depends. If you go with Hashem, so then you have the Chayil. If you go without Hashem, so then you get Dechi. That's the word of the Netziv of the Hamikdavar, which, by the way, impresses upon us the great lesson that when we have a tzaddik with us, when we have Torah with us, it gives us blessing. And when the Torah leaves, the blessing departs. This is a Gemara in Yavamis, a famous Gemara in Yavamis, and that's why I mention it now, that what happens in the world happens because of Yisrael. The Gemara in Yavamis, on Daf Tzamach Gimel, the Gemara over there says, V'nivrachu v'cha kol mishpachos Adam. And they'll be blessed through you, all the families of the land. And says the Gemara that afilu sfinos habois migalya la'aspamya, even boats traveling far away, ain't nowhere near where Jews live. Boats that are traveling in India, ain't mizbarchos ela b'shvil Yisrael. Therefore, you have to know, although it's very complex, the idea of boys getting support from their in-laws, from their parents. What happens if a girl cannot give support? And that's a very, very delicate subject that needs probably a lot of improvement. But there's no question that if a father-in-law or a father, together with his wife, together with the mother-in-law, has the wherewithal to support the Ben Torah, and they do so, there's no question that brings incredible bracha to them. There's no question. There are people that say, well, I believe that a couple should make it on their own. I don't believe in PhD and Papa has dough. I have to make it on my own. Let them make it on their own. That's a mistake. If people are blessed with money and they could support children learning Torah, we should know that the bracha comes to them from that. As long as Yaakov was in Lavan's house, even though Lavan wasn't supporting him altruistically, but even so, as long as Lavan was in Yaakov was in Lavan's house, he had tremendous blessing. As soon as he left, the house was ransacked. Everything was lost. That makes it obvious that it's Zeh because of that. It makes it obvious that's because of the support of Torah. Now, we find that Rachel Imeinu, we know she stole the Truffim. She wanted to rehabilitate her father. She had another reason that she didn't want her father. The Truffim which were shrunken heads. They were actually human heads that were cut off and shrunken, and certain things were put under the tongue, and the Truffim said the future. And she didn't want that Lavan should know that they were skipping town. That was a secondary reason, but she also wanted to rehabilitate her father. It's brought down in the Mefarshim, in the Rishonim, that the way Lavan knew that they left is as soon as Yaakov left, his wells dried out. And that's how he knew. But she wanted that they should get a head start. She didn't know that would happen, so she stole the Truffim. It was very costly to her, because Yaakov inadvertently cursed her, Imes asher timtzeh le'yecha lo yichya, and Rachel Imeinu passed away at the very young age of 36, Le'aleinu. We'll talk about that a little later. Leah passed away at 45, but Rachel Imeinu passed away at 36. When after Lavan really ransacked their camp, and maybe Mida Keneged Mida, because of that, his house was ransacked. They ransacked Yaakov's camp looking for his Truffim. So he knew that Rachel Imeinu was a suspect in taking the Truffim. So he wanted to search in her saddlebag underneath her. Vatomer el Avia, she said to her father, Al yichar be'enei adoini. It shouldn't be, you shouldn't get angry at me. Ki loy uchal kom mipanech, I can't get up. Ki derech noshim li. Because I have the way of women, which simply put is a clean way of saying that she was nida. Ki derech noshim li. And look, you can't fool a clever person like Lavan. So Lavan said, sure. And he went ahead and he checked under her anyway. And the Medrash says that Hashem made a miracle and the Trofim turned into kitonyos. They turned into pitchers. They turned into flasks. And the Medrash says, Shaloi levayish es Rachel. Not to embarrass Rachel. Which, by the way, that's an interesting Medrash. It didn't change into flasks in order to help save Lavan, to help rehabilitate him. Hashem wouldn't make a miracle to save Lavan from Avodah Zarah because B'derech Shadam writes the way a person is supposed to go, they're led. He just didn't want Rachel to be embarrassed, so it turned into Kitonias. And by the way, it's probable that when Lavan got home and found his house burglarized and ransacked, he would blame it on Yaakov and say that it was ransacked because he didn't have his Trofim. So the Trofim weren't protecting him. And that's a pure example of that in the same thing, tzadikim yelchuba, upoishim yikashlubai. That righteous people see good and wicked people see bad. They stumble. So he probably got home and said, I know why I got ransacked. This is the first time I'm without my Trofim. I didn't have my protection. So you see the Rabbeinu Shalom lets the wicked stumble. Oh, but here's the question. We know that Rachel Imeinu Ishtoi Kegufai, which hopefully we'll speak about later as well, Rachel Imeinu Ishtoi Kegufai, she would not lie. She would not prevaricate. So how did she say, Ki derech noshim hili? How did she say that? So there's a very interesting pshatim over here. For example, one pshat they say is that Nida is Tomei K'avodah Zarah. So therefore, when she said Ki derech noshim hili, she meant that there's Tumah by me like Nida. And that's Avodah Zarah. So she wasn't, in other words, Mamish was following in the footsteps of Yaakov, who said, Anoichi Esav B'charecha, which is supposed to be read, Anoichi, it's I, and Esav is B'charecha. When she said, Ki derech noshim hili, she meant, and this is the, many Mefarshim say this, she said, there's a Tumah over here, Ki derech noshim, there's a Tumah like Nida, and that's Avodah Zarah, which is a Tumah like Nida. Rabbi Yitzchak Mivolozhin says a different shot. He says that she was directly referring to the kishuf of the Trofim. Because in those days, women practiced sorcery. They were the Mechad, that's why it says Mechashefa lo Yisachaya. Why a woman? Usually the Torah speaks about the man, and it's assigned to the woman too. Here it says Mechashefa lo Yisachaya, because it was the derech of women to practice sorcery. Like on today's daf, Yochni Bas Retiva was a great sorceress. Right? So it was a derech of women. So she said, Ki derech noshim hili. By me is the way of women. By me is the Trofim. It's the Kishuf. It's the way of women. It's the way of Mechashvais. That's the way Rabbi Yitzchak Mivolozhin learns. There's another pshat of Ki derech noshim hili. And by the way, I always thought it was fascinating, knowing that the Trofim were shrunken heads. So Trofim is the same letters as pre-mace, the fruit of the dead. Because that's what a shrunken head is. It's the pre-mace. It comes from the dead. It's the fruit of the dead. Or it could mean roughy mace. Roughy means if the liquid comes out of it. So it's a shrunken mace. That's what Trofim are. But it could be that Rachel Imeinu also darshan the word Trofim. Because if you look in the Trofim, it's also the letters Yofer Tam. It should be annulled by the Tam. So she felt it was the family, Yaakov Ishtam, the family's job to annul the Trofim. That's why she stole the Trofim. Lamaisa is, I wanted to say a different shot in what it says, Derech Noshim Hili. And that is, it's the way of, this is my own shot. I just told you big pshat, and my own shot, but I feel that there's a great emes in this pshat. Rachel Imenu said to her tata, Ki derech noshim hili. It's the way of women by me. What's the way of women? The way of women is Soifia Halichos Beisa. She oversees the way of her home. She's worried about the spirituality of her home. Rachel Imenu was worried about the spirituality of her tata. It's a tata. Ki derech noshim hili. She said the truth. It's the way of women. Good Yiddish women are worried about the spirituality of their home. So they oversee, they're worried about the ruchnias. They say, what do we need it? What do we need these computers over here polluting? Why do we need to bring in the papers? Ki derech noshim hili. What do we need these trofim? However, a woman should not be a mashkiach. She's a mashkiach on the children, it's good, not on her husband. In the Gemara, we learned in Sight, it says that sometimes schus taila, a woman could be guilty of adultery, but the schus could stave off up to 3 years her exploding from the bitter waters. So the Gemara says in one shot, even though she doesn't have Torah, it's schus Torah, that she has her children do the homework, and that she waits up for her husband until he comes home from the Beis HaMikdash. The Natur Legavayu, she waits for her husband until they come from the Beis HaMikdash. So one shot in the Rishonim is they allowed their husbands to go away from home. They gave up their conjugal rights, their oina, so their husband should learn. But the Pashut shot is that they show their husbands, you're going to go out to a Daf Yomi Friday night, I'll wait up for you. She tells you, if you're going to sit by a Shalom Zachar and drink beer and eat harbis for an hour, I'm not waiting up for you. You're going to go to a shir, I'll wait up for you. And always she shows that she's machshiv her husband learning. That's the way to get a husband to learn. I admire this about you. If she tells her husband to learn, he's probably not going to learn. Who are you to tell me? You know better than me. Who's the most unpopular person in the yeshiva? The mashkiach. So he's going to say, why aren't you learning now? Why are you such a partner? That's the worst way for a wife to get. You have to be tzayfi alichas beisa, but it has to be with chachma. Hava es ishni. Yaakov says, give me my wife. Kimolu yomai. I worked what I was supposed to. Va'avoa eleha. And now I want to come on to her. So everybody asked, what's the grubba lashon from such a tzaddik? Va'avoa eleha. Such a grubba lashon. So the Heilige Ben Ishchai, the tzaddik levrachas chusa yagan aleinu, he says a very fascinating thing. He says, we all know, it was also a recent Gemara in Saita, Ish ve'isha shalom beinayim, shchina shruya beinayim. When an Ish and an Isha have shalom, so the Yud of the Ish and the Hey of the Isha fuse together and give us the Shem Ka. Says the Ben Ishchai, the Shem Ka is not the whole name. He says, they have a mitzvah period of a rivya to have a boy and a girl. So when they have a boy, that's the Vav. When they have a girl, that's the other Hey. So when they fulfill period of a rivya and they have a boy and a girl, so that's Mashlam the Shem Hashem. In other words, the Yud and the Hey is if the Yud from Ish and the Hey from Isha. They have a boy that gives them a Vav, and they have a girl that gives them the other Hey, and that's Pshat. Matzah Isha Matzah Taiv, V'yafak Ratzain Mei Hashem. Then they complete the name of Hashem with the birth of a boy and a girl. Says the Ben Ishchai, that's Pshat. Va'avoya Eleha. It should have said Va'avoya Eleha. So there's an extra vav and an extra hey. Va'avoy eleha. The Avaya means then you will get the Vav and the Hey. When Va'avai, and you have a boy and a girl, then it'll be Va'avoya Eleha. You'll have the Vav and the Hey. That will complete the Shem Hashem. Then he says another thing. He says, the Seder Olam tells us that Rachel and Leah, who are twins, married Yaakov when they were 23. And Rachel lived till 36. So he says that they lived together a total, it seems to be that it was in the 22nd year. So they lived together, excuse me, I said 23, no, not 23, 21. They get married at 21, and she passed away at 36. So he lived with her a total of 15 years. So that's Pshat Va'avoa Eleha. Eleha is El Yud K. That's Eleha. El Ka. El 15. And he says that also explains, it's a very strange thing. It says, Vayitein loy es Rachel bitai loy leisha. Now that's extra words. Vayitein loy Rachel bitai loy leisha. What do you mean loy leisha? Vayitein loy Rachel bitai leisha. What's loy leisha? Loy is 36. Only kept her for 36. After that she passed away. V'Rachel ba im hatzayin asher lavia ki royahi. Rachel came with the sheep that was to her father because she was a shepherd. It's a very simple question. Why was Rachel a shepherd and not Leah? Leah was a little older, only seconds. But why was Rachel the shepherd? If anything, it would have been safe for Rachel was so beautiful. Kitayvas Mari. You send her out with the men? Leah, ain't a Leah Rakais. Send Leah out. Why are you sending Rachel out? Or they should have done it together. Why Rachel got the work and Leah didn't? What's going on? So it's interesting that the Ramban asks the question, and the Ramban says that since Ein Leah Rakas, from all the crying, and the eyelashes came out, and without eyelashes, the sun was very hot on her. And she couldn't be a shepherd. The Dazakain Balitaisa says the same thing, except that he doesn't say the sun. He says the wind that caused the sand to go into their eyes, she had no protection. She couldn't be a shepherd. Which, if you think about it, if you gave it a casual glance, you would say, how unfair. She lost her eyelashes because she prayed not to fall in the lot of Esav. And because of her eyelashes, that's why Yaakov didn't get to see her, because she couldn't be a shepherd. It looks like it's unfair. We see, of course, that it's not that way. Kim Yashem, Yatza Adavar. But that's the pshat of the Ramban, of the Dazakain and Balitasis. Reb Yonasan Eibschitz says something else. Fascinating, Reb Yonasan Eibschitz. Zechat Tzadik L'Vracha Schusa Yogan Aleina. Reb Yonasan Eibschitz says that Lavan had a cheshbon that Leah would marry Esav. That's what they said, the older one to the older son, and the younger one to the younger one. So Leah would marry Esav, and Rachel would marry Yaakov. Or if that's the case, so then Esav was the man, the hunter. So he's going to want a homemaker. So he kept Leah at home. Yaakov is Ishtam Yoshev Halim. He's going to want to have somebody who's going to make a panosa, a Kailu wife. So he made her a raya. The Yonasan Eibschitz says, the original Kailu wife, right? Taught her PT, right? OT. Computers. Yaakov is Ishtam Yoshev Halim. He needs a wife that's going to be a raya. Esav is a guy that's always out in the field. He's going to want a wife at home, so he kept Leah at home. So according to Rabbi Yonasan Eibschitz, what happened? So then why did Lavan do the whole spiel and give Leah first to Yaakov? Well, Actually, a very interesting word that the Yagdul Torah says that the reason why Yaakov didn't insist to marry Rachel right away and was ready to wait the 7 years is because he was hoping that in the meantime Leah should get married and he shouldn't have to marry the younger sister first. But what changed Lavan's mind? He was keeping Leah for Esav. What changed his mind? So I thought of 3 possibilities. It could be simply that Leah put her foot down and says, Daddy, I'm not marrying Esav no matter what. Not over my dead body. It could be that Lavan, who was always the money man, realized that Yaakov was the golden worker, and therefore he wanted to keep Yaakov longer. Or it could be that he thought that since Leah had Eine Leah Rakis and didn't look that good because of that, or look different, he thought that Esav wouldn't want her. So therefore, he orchestrated that Leah should go to Yaakov. Vayoretz l'kraisai, he ran to greet him. Vayechabek loi, and he hugged him. Vayenashek loi, and he kissed him. Mamish, he loves Yaakov, a family member. So Rashi says, yeah, sure. Rashi says, he made a kal v'chayma. Lavan's a kal v'chayma. We make kal v'chayma, and lahavdil, Lavan makes kal v'chaymas. Lavan's a kal v'chayma. Madach Eliezer Eved Avram came with 10 camels full of stuff. V'kol tov Adonav biyadai. Yaakov himself, he must come with what kind of portfolio must have. And then he sees he's empty-handed. So then, he hugged him. Maybe he has bars of gold in his vest packet. When that wasn't there, Vayishik, he kissed him. Maybe he's keeping pearls smuggled in his mouth. Now, how did he know this? Aitzis Panini HaTorah say, how do we know? How does Rashi know that it's not Kipshutai? I mean, it has to be Oichacha that he was doing this not for altruistic reasons. So the Aitzis Panini HaTorah says a beautiful thing. There's an extra lie. It should have said Vayechabek Vayenashek loi. He hugged and he kissed him. Why does it say Vayechabek loi Vayenashek loi? He repeats it to say that he didn't do it for Yaakov, he did it for himself. Vayechabek loi, he did it for himself. He was trying to find the gold, he was trying to find the money. Now, in a more practical way, there's a very important lesson over here. And that is, there are many times where people act very friendly with people, and they hug them, and they kiss them, but they're not really friends. They're affluent people, so with affluent people, you can get something out of them. Hey, you like to be invited to their house. It's good to be connected to them. So they're only hugging and kissing for the money, not necessarily that they're looking for stuff in the cheeks, but more symbolically, the love and the kisses, it's not real love and kisses like it was by Lavan. It's only because of the money, and that's why if the person loses the money, all of a sudden they're not calling anymore. All of a sudden they're not inviting you over. Fair weather friends is a very big problem. Watch out for this. And watch out not to do this. Vayachaloim, v'hinei sulam mutzav artzai, v'roisha magia hashamayma, and he dreamed, and there was a ladder placed on the ground, rooted on the ground, and it reached the heavens, v'hinei malachi elikim oilim v'yardim bay, and angels were going up and coming down. So we all know the famous Balaturim. Balaturim says that Sulam, which is Begematria 136, is also Begematria money. Says the Balaturim, shortened to the point, Shezeh mashpil v'zer yorim, that people lose their money, Hashem causes people to lose their money, and causes people to get money. Which Bepashtus, which on the simple level, is a reference to Yaakov's life. In other words, Yaakov saw in the dream that there's going to be ups and downs. He came to, he was going to Padan Aram, and he was very wealthy. Yitzchak sent him with great wealth in order to get a shidduch. And Eliphaz came to kill him, and he had to do the lumdus of Ani Choshev Kameis, and Eliphaz stripped him of everything. So he lost everything. He went and he was nitman in Shem Ve'eber 14 years. He had to travel, and Vayasaper L'Loven Es Kol Advarim Ha'ela, he told them all what happened. And then afterwards he walks away with all of Lavan's wealth. Right? There's ups and downs, and each for the time that is necessary. For example, Hashem didn't want Yaakov to be camped out at Shem Ve'ever with huge wealth, because here he wanted to learn 14 years, undisturbed. He didn't even sleep. If he would have all kinds of wealth outside, he would be busy with his managers. He would have to take care of problems. He would have to make sure that the workers are paid. Right? He wouldn't be able to learn undisturbed. So Hashem said, now wealth is not good for you. He takes it away. If he would have came with money to Lavan, he would have demanded Rachel, and he would offer a big nadan. Lavan wouldn't have played around, because then he wouldn't have gotten a nadan. He would have never gotten Leah. So for that time, Hashem took away all his money. Later on, Hashem gave him back the money. Right? So that mashkel, that's Sulam, Mammon, is ups and downs. But the Chidah over here adds a caveat that's very important for us to know. The Chidah says, why did he have the dream about the money at this juncture? That money, there are ups and downs with money. Why did he have that dream at this juncture? Says the Chidah, because he was going to marry, and in the language of the Chidah, let me quote the language of the Chidah, the ukiyadua, and as it is known, oisher v'haniyas tluya b'isha, that poverty and wealth depend on the wife. Now this is a Gemara, a very important Gemara. The Gemara says, "Ein bracha shruya b'seich beisay shel adam ela b'shvil ishtay." There's no blessing in a person's home except for his wife. Shenemar v'Avram heitiv b'avura. And Avram, Hashem was good to him, right? Avram, it says better the manure of Avram Avinu than all the wealth of Avimelech. Avram was fabulously wealthy. So you'll say Avram was fabulously wealthy because he was Avamoin Goyim. He was fabulously wealthy because of his wife. Ein bracha shruya b'sei beisay shel adam ela b'shvil ishta. So says the Chidah, you know why there are ups and downs with money? Why he was given that dream now? Because you're going to get married, you should know it's all dependent upon the way you treat your wife. Here a person says, listen, my wife does a lot of things, but money she has nothing to do with. She's a housewife. She's a homemaker. The money that I have has nothing to do. Some people, their wife brings, the wife is a lawyer, a doctor, they bring her money. My wife, she's a homemaker, she never helped with the money. That's a big mistake. There's a Gemara where Rava says to the Bnei Mechuzah, Rava was a great pulpit Rav. Not only was Rava a Talmudist, he was very rare Rava. He wasn't only a great Talmudist, he wore two hats. He was a great pulpit Rav. He was the Rav of the busy city of Mechuzah. Mechuzah was a port city. It was a very wealthy city. It says in Gittin, Shani b'nei Mechuzah denaide. The people of Mechuzah. It was a port city. So Rava told his congregants, B'matusa minaychu, I beg of you, hoikiru nishaychu, honor your wives, ki heichi de tisasru, in order that you become wealthy. Now this is an amazing Gemara. This is an amazing Gemara. The Gemara tells us that Rava told them he gave them business of advice. I beg of you, listen to me. I'm not just telling you, Seite Gesachen. Hoikiru neshaychu, honor your wives, ki heichi detisasru, in order that you become wealthy. Now, be'emes is it's a pella de kazach. If you were Rava, and you were a Rav, what would you say? Wouldn't you say, honor your wives? Because ish ve'isha shalom beineim shchina shruya beim, the shchina is at stake. The very shchina is not more important than dollars. Or wouldn't you tell them, honor your wife? Because it's v'afta l'yachid kamoicha. The Gemara says in Kedusha. Or wouldn't you tell them, there's so many divorces. Your children, if you want your children to grow up and know how to behave, they have to see you honoring your wives. You have to teach by example. If I was Rav, I would have said one of those things. But Rava was a Rav. Smart Rav. I'm also a Rav, but not as smart as Rav. Rava was a smart Rav. And he said, look, they want money. They listen to the greenbacks. They listen to the rubles. I tell them about the rubles. They listen. So I tell them, you get money. Get money. That's what we're learning over here. Says the Chidah, that which Sulam is v'gematria your mom, and that which she gets to dream now is because the ups and downs of money have to do with the way we treat our wives. And you'll say, why is the parnasa determined by the wife? What's the husband chop liver? Husband learns Torah. It ain't Torah and Kemach. Why is it after Avraham Avinu was so great? Why is it the wife? So again, we go back to Ish and Isha. The Yud is in Ish and the Hey is in Isha. And remember, we learned Kibikah Hashem Tzurei Lamim. He created Olam Haba with the Yud. He created Olam Hazeh with the Hey. Eila told the Shemayim Baritz B'Hi Baram. The bracha of Olam Hazeh, the bracha of Olam Hazeh comes from the Hey of the wife. So now I'll just very quickly say something that I said many years ago, that if you remember, the husband, when Hashem said, how can you eat from the forbidden fruit? Right? You're going to be cursed. You're going to be cursed. You're going to be cursed with shver panasa. So what did the husband say as a defense? The woman gave it to me. I listened to my wife. Says the Rabbeinu Shalom, you know what? If you honor your wife and you keep to your excuse, I won't give you that curse. But let me see that you honor your wife. Let me see. But again, remember, it's an amazing thing. Rava tells them, he's giving a drush in the main shul. Put yourself into the main shul of Mechuzah. He's giving a drasha. And he's saying, Rabbi say, I beg of you, honor your wives in order that you should become rich. People are saying, in the Mizrach, did he say because of rich? Why didn't he say because of the Shechina? Why didn't he say because of after Kamoicha? Why didn't he say it should be a good example for the children? Those reasons are all true. You want to get Balabatim to do something, tell them how they'll become rich. They want to hear that. He took from the stones of the place and put it under his head. And then later it says, so we all know, Rashi says, originally there was stones, and then it became one stone. Why? Because each one fought, each one said, I want Yaakov to put his head on me. So Hashem went ahead and fused them into one rack in order that they should be only one rack. And that's why later it says, Vayikach Hashem. So the Imrei Emes from Ger asked the Pasha the Kasha. Many people asked the question, what's that going to help? Still Yaakov could only put his head on one part of the rack. So the other parts are going to say, I want it to be on my part. Right? What's it going to help? So the answer is that when it becomes one, when a person is one, he's not jealous. Your right hand is not jealous of your left hand. Your right foot is not jealous of the left foot. So when they become one, When there's an achdus, there's no kinna, there's no machloikis. Of course, the application of this is again in marriage. You have today that spouses are jealous of one another. He gets to go out, I'm stuck in the home all the time. I'm working so hard, and she's out with her friends having strawberries and cream. And spouses are jealous of one another. The emerson is, the Torah's hashkafa of marriage is ishtay kegufa. Right? It's going to manifest itself lahalacha very shortly on Hanukkah. Right? Hanukkah, everybody likes. According to Ramosha, the girls also like. The unmarried girls also like. But not the wife. Why? Because ishtay kegufa. So there are many halachas where it's nagei ishtay kegufa. Wife comes a lot of times before the children because ishtay kegufa. Kiyim l'she'eira yakara ve'elav. The closest relative, that's a wife, ishtay kegufa. But ishtay kegufa is not just a halachic element. It's a hashkafic element. The famous story of Rav Aryeh Levine, the tzaddik in our time, where they report that he went to the doctor with his wife. She was having a leg problem. So he told the doctor, our leg is hurting us. Our leg. That's the idea of ishtay kegufa. I always wanted to learn that lesson is clear in the beginning of the Torah. Remember, it says that Avram Avinu pitched the tent. Vayet oholoi. He pitched his tent, and it's spelled Aleph Hey Lamed Hey. It's read oholoi, his tent, but it's written Aleph Hey Lamed Hey. And Rashi says because he pitched her tent first, because it says you should be mechabed as ishta yoyse megufay. Somebody once complained to me that his wife was sitting in his chair. So I said, why should that be a taina? It says mechabda yoyse megufay. Right? So that's why it says it's written Aleph Hey Lamed Hey. So there's an obvious kash on this Rashi. So then why doesn't it, if he pitched our tent first, it should say that. Vayet ohala. He pitched our tent. Why does it say that? It says Vayet ohala, but it's read ohala. But if he pitched our tent first, so say that. Vayet ohala. The Torah says he pitched her tent first, but he pitched it as if it was his. Because of ishtay kegufa. That's pshat. He did hers, but when he did hers, it was as if he did his, because they're one. Now, when you worked up, this is not an easy thing at all. This is a very high level, but it's at least something to aspire to. When a husband achieves, when a wife achieves that they're like one, then you can't be jealous of what the other one has, because we're one. The right hand is not jealous of the left hand. That's the aim, that's the goal. Of course, it also means that there's no tit for tat in marriage. It's like they say a cute thing, that by the Goyim, they try to make it equitable, 50-50. Everybody gives 50%. By us, everybody has to give 100%. Because it's not tit for tat. You don't make a cheshbon, my right hand did this, my left hand did that. You don't make such a cheshbon. It's all one. It's not this is not an evi akshkaf at all. But that's the lesson of the rock. Once the rock becomes one, then there's no machloikis, but sit on the right side of the rock, lie your head on the right side of the rock, the left side of the rock. Now, then there's another question, and that is, Hashem was already making a miracle, so then turn the rock into a pillow. You're making a miracle anyway, make it into a pillow, right? Make it into a, expensive down pillow. Why do you have to sit on the rock? And Teretz is, the Yagdal Torah says, from machloikis nothing becomes good. There's no good result from machloikis. You don't get they were fighting, you don't get good from machloikis. Bad comes from it. It can't become a pillow for machloikis, which is also a very important lesson. Now, Vayaitzay Yaakov mi Be'er Shava, Vayelech Harana. So, In Bereshis Rabbah, it comments that sometimes the man goes to the wife, and sometimes the wife goes to the man. Although normally we say that it's the husband that looks for the Metzia, but Lamaisa is sometimes the man goes to the wife, sometimes the wife goes to the man. And case in point, Rivka came to Yitzchak. Rivka came and she saw Vayaitzay Yitzchak l'suach basada, and she saw Yitzchak. So Rivka came to her husband. And over here, Yaakov comes to get his wife. Vayaitzay Yaakov and Beersheva, Vayelech Haran. So we learn out that there's Hashgacha Pratis, and Me'ashem Yatza Adavar. There's no rule. Sometimes the husband finds the wife, sometimes the wife finds the husband. It's very important to know that there's no fixed way that this happens. So the Medrash over here says something. I said this, even though usually I don't like to say a story twice. But I said this story once in this shir, but I'm repeating it again. And I said it years ago. I'm repeating it again for further elaboration. The Medrash says that Shlomo HaMelech had a daughter. Of course, he had many daughters. He had 1,000 wives. So with 1,000 wives, you have a lot of daughters. But this daughter was the Idyas Sheba Idyas. This daughter was the creme de la creme. The Medrash goes on to rave about this daughter, that she was a mitziyenes in every way. I mean, mamish, the apple of Shlomo HaMelech's eye. Imagine if you have 1,000 wives, you're bound to have the daughter. She was, talk about the best boy in Lakewood. This was the best girl in the palace. Right? So the Chayzei Kechavim, Shlomo HaMelech had on his staff stargazers. And the stargazers told Shlomo that Al Pi the stars, Al Pi Mazel, this daughter is going to marry Ani Marud Shebi Yisrael. He's going to marry the poorest man, a homeless man in Israel. So Shlomo HaMelech had a very interesting reaction. He said, okay, if that's going to be, I want to show people that this should be a case study. Since she has such a clear fate, there's no question in the stars, I want to show the Olam ki ma'ashem yatza adav. So with the girl's permission, he consigned her to a tower on an isolated island. It was an island that nobody could get to. It was protected by Shlomo's army. And he put it in a tower with no steps. Of course, he took care of her with delicious food and all kinds of things to give her. Maybe some friendinas visited her as well. But it was guarded by Shivim Zakenim, by 70 elders. Don't let anybody in. And then Shlomo said, okay, let's wait and see how Hashem does this. The hero of our story was a homeless Jew who had nothing, had no home. He didn't even have a way to travel to the park bench. It was a freezing night, and he didn't know what to do. He was going to die of frostbite. So he's walking in the field, and he comes across the carcass of an ox that was attacked by a lion. And the lion devoured the guts and the inside of the ox and left the outside of the carcass. So here he was freezing. He climbed into the carcass and wrapped himself in it and went to sleep. Listen, you can't be squeamish if you're freezing to death. So the shah still had the outside with all the hide, so it was warm. And he went into the skeleton of the ox, wrapped himself up, and went to sleep. Tired. In the middle of the night, vulture came and saw dinner, saw the carcass, but there were some other vultures there. So he didn't want to share it. So he picked up it was a big vulture. He picked up the carcass and flew with it and looked for a place to eat dinner. And he finds the porch of the tower. The tower had a big porch for the princess. She could come out. He lands on the porch, eats up the outside of the carcass, and leaves. Our young pauper wakes up in the morning, light streaming in, and he realizes he's high up in the air. He gets up, he sees this majestic porch, he looks around, there's water all around him. He doesn't know what happened. Maybe he's in heaven. In the meantime, comes tefillah time. The princess comes out to say Shacharis. And who's sitting on our porch? A young man. He's not dressed very nicely, but she knows the whole story, so she asks him, how did you get here? You have a young man on the porch, how did you get here? So he told her the story that he slept in a carcass of an ox, and somehow he got over here, and they got to talking, and she found out that he's a very pleasant, learned young man. The young man said to her, she told the young man what she's doing in the tower. So he said, well, it seems to be that this is proper. Will you marry me? And she said yes, and he took some blood, and he wrote down a ksuva, and they went downstairs together, and Shlomo HaMelech asked the Zakanim, how did he get in there? And they said, look, we protected it, we have no idea. And Shlomo HaMelech rejoiced to see me, Hashem Yotzei Hadavar, and they married, and they lived happily ever after. Now, one of the lessons of this amazing story, besides the Hashgacha Pratis of the story, is that Shlomo HaMelech's reaction wasn't, listen, this daughter deserves the most aristocratic family. I'm going to stop this. That wasn't his reaction. Do you know how many people say that he's not good enough for my son? She's not good, he's not good enough for my daughter. She's not good enough for my son. We see that Shlomo HaMelech didn't rebel against Hashgacha. Family has to see Hashgacha. It's very important. And Hashgacha there is, I remember that there was somebody that came to visit Yeshiva Staten Island camp Yeshiva Staten Island Kerhankson. Since Rav Moshe was there, so people would come for Shabbos to be near Rav Moshe. And I used to take care in the yeshiva the medicine. Several nights I realized there was nobody that knew much about medicine in the yeshiva, it was a dormitory. So for several nights I read some medical books in the bathroom. And I became a quasi-expert in medicine, especially in OTC, over-the-counter drugs, and all their interactions, and which one was better. And I used to take care of medicine in the yeshiva. I was the quasi-nurse. And there was somebody that had a burn, and I got to them Silvadine. They needed Silvadine. Anyway, the mother of the boy was so grateful, she wanted to find out who's this Weiss. I'm going to make him a shidduch. And she had a friend who knew my wife. And together they made the shidduch. From a burn, from a Silvadine. Ki me'Hashem yotzeh hadav. I want to conclude. It's very late tonight. I'm very sorry. We had a lot of things conspiring to cause the delay. The first thing that happened this evening was the download of this Daf and Saita got messed up on TorahAnytime.com, which delayed me 10 minutes because of that. And then we had the Yahrzeit Suda over here that made things more complicated. I thank you all for your amazing patience. Vayaitzay Yaakov mi Be'er Shava vayelech Harana. Yaakov left Be'er Shava and he went to Harana. There's extra words over here. It shouldn't say Vayelech. It says Vayaitzay Yaakov mi Be'er Shava l'Haran. So the Lamed of Vayelech is not extra. But the Vav, Yud, and Chaf of Vayelech is extra. And the Hey of Harana is extra. So you have 4 extra letters. Instead of saying Vayaitzay Yaakov mi Be'er Shava vayelech Harana, it could have just said Vayaitzay Yaakov mi Be'er Shava l'Haran. So you have extra Vav, Yud, Chaf, and Hey. It's amazing. Comes along Reb Chaim Volozhin, and he says that the Medrash says that when Yaakov left, she gave him a bracha, ki malochav yitzavulach l'shmorcha b'chol drachecha. And why that pasuk? because the soif tevis of ki malach of yitzavalach is Yud Vav Hei Chaf. Yud Vav Hei Chaf is the shame that protects a person when traveling. Yud Hei Vav Chaf. So you'll say, yeah, okay, thanks. But Rav Chaim of Volozhin says, it says that if you depart from your friend, al yiftar adam mechaveiroi ele mitoch dvar halacha. When you leave, you should depart with a dvar halacha. And the Vilna Gaon always used to say, Yochid v'rabim halacha karab. So probably, Reb Chaim, Talmud of the Gaon, says, what's epis this pasuk? Yochid v'rabim halacha karabim, what's epis? Look at the Rosh Hashanah says, Yochid v'rabim halacha karabim. Look at the, not Yochid v'rabim halacha karabim. Yeah. Look at the Rosh Hashanah. Yud Vav Hei Chaf. Yochid v'rabim malach karab. It's those letters again. Yud Vav Hei Chaf. It says that's why it says Vayelech Harana, and it doesn't say Miber Shava l'Charan. The extra letters are Vav Yud Hei Chaf. Those are the letters that we escort a person with on their trip, that they should have a safe trip.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.